Ready.
We ready?
We are ready.
Okay, the first thing on the agenda is the minutes of our last meeting. Are there any changes to those? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
Motion.
Bruce Burrow, is there a second?
Adam.
Adam? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So they pass. Then the next item on the agenda are the C and D recommendations. And as I read over these, my question is, what specifically are we looking to do with this item on the agenda? Pete, could you tell us?
So let me get a little bit of clarification for you. What are we trying to do with the report? What recyclable materials state department
No.
uses products, or what are we doing with the C and D recommendation?
With the impact effort matrix.
Oh, my understanding, Sandra, is that we have not really completed a priority list for recommendations. We haven't decided that we're working on this one, but I think that it was, if I remember correctly, in the past committee, that it wasn't real high on the previous committee's list.
I think that was partially because we were looking at the C and D recycling, and that looked like it was something that we could explore more readily than some of the other items on there. Trying to develop priorities out of this thing that I printed out. I'm sorry, my brain does not deal with little boxes on multiple pieces of paper.
Correct. I think that Diane, did we send out a thing that showed each recommendation and got into what those recommendations meant? I know we talked about that on the slides last week.
Yes. Let's see here.
We're seeing it.
I got an email that showed the impact effort matrix, or that she sent me.
Do you guys see the?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Do you need me to make it bigger?
If you can, please.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, Sandra, is what you can't work from is that slide right there.
No, that isn't what mine looks like at all. Mine looks more like a whole bunch of big blocks.
Go to the next one, Diane.
That's on about 13 pieces of paper.
What I sent was the Excel of the recommendations and the strategies together. But each one of those is the same thing that's right here.
Okay, so Sandra, I'm not sure what you're referencing.
Sandra, I got to think the same thing that Sandra got, and it's basically, yeah, that, and it's just, it has each of the categories broken down into different color codings, but it didn't have it in that impact matrix that showed where people thought high impact, low effort. I didn't get that part. I just got all of the items.
Well,
Well, and each of the 13 pages is not exactly the same, like you've got sort of gold and blue colored things on the thing you're showing us. Everything I got was either rust colored or green.
Mhm. That's right. That's because that is the residential and South Hall. Hang on. Just a second.
and all we're seeing is a gray screen.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm nervous.
No need to be nervous.
Oh my gosh, I failed straight away.
And just to recap or make sure I'm on the same page, we're wanting to take another look at this impact effort matrix to determine if there are other items on this list that we need to be spending time on versus the large amount of time we've devoted to the C&D processing and maybe some of the other things. And we're just trying to determine if one of these other categories we need to be spending time with also. Is that correct or?
That was my understanding, Adam. I think that, the fact that we haven't really settled on a particular item that we're going to work on to complete. We've had a lot of discussion, but we haven't really settled on a topic that we're going to focus on. Even though we have focused on C&D a lot. I think that was what we were doing, was sending these out so that we can use that impact effort matrix, if that's what people want to do, to kind of prioritize and come up with, and make sure that we're not missing something that we want to work on, or we can say we just want to complete that one real quick, saying we're not going to do it, or we're going to, we're going to say we're not going to do it right now and get it off of our plate, just to kind of clean things up and get clarity on what we're going to focus on.
Okay.
That was my understanding. Committee, correct me if I'm wrong in my what I'm saying there.
That was my understanding also.
My impression though also is that the reason that we've been spending so much time on C&D is that early on, we did select looking at C&D as being easier to look at than residential. And I do think we've made a fair amount of progress. I think the people that you've been bringing in to talk to us have been very beneficial. And I think that picking another totally different thing right now, I'm not opposed to it, but I think we've come a long way with looking at C&D. Did you want us, if we stayed with C&D, did you want us to pick a specific one of these under C&D?
I would think that we would want to pick a certain one to focus on. And I think that not that they're not related, because I do think that they are all related. The more that we get into these things, the more we see how they kind of intertwine with each other. But I would think that, yes, the short answer is yes. I would want us to focus on one area.
I think if we continue to focus on C&D, which again, we've spent a lot of time on that, but I agree with Sandra. I think we're making progress, and it's something that's going to take a lot of attention, in my opinion, before you can get anywhere with this. And really, of the two things pictured right on our screen, reuse of materials and road construction and the C&D processing ordinance, those two, in my opinion, go really hand in hand, because part of the C&D processing is one of the main items we talked about is shingles or roofing shingles, asphalt. So some of those different materials that you're looking to process would be a prime candidates for reuse of materials and road construction. So to me, those two things kind of go together a little bit, or if you're working on the C&D, to me, a big portion of that is shingles or material that could be used back in road construction. So those two will kind of go along together in the process, I think. And then
Adam, if I may, I agree with you 100% that they dovetail together really nicely. I think it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. You know, we've talked about the C&D processing ordinance, and you know, we've kind of come to this place where we're looking at downstream and whether we have the end uses. And I think our conversation went towards the road construction without even really realizing it. And because we was going to talk about driving the C&D processing ordinance through driving the end use markets to a certain degree. And, you know, that's kind of where we went anyway. So, you know, to continue to focus on this C&D processing ordinance and the reuse material in road construction, I think we're talking about the same thing. In the end, we might write it up a little bit different, but I do think that they are really pretty close to the same thing.
I agree. I wonder if continuing on that road, the next thing for us to really take a look at is who's using recycled materials in their road construction? How do they get it? Is it effective? And I guess we're back to what you said, Pete. We need to look at the end users for some of this.
Yeah, and the discussions that we've had about the C&D material, to me, has been very beneficial to myself, and I hope to everybody on the committee. And I think that we've talked about it enough that everybody has a pretty good background education on it at this point. And I feel like that we're almost going to be getting to a maintenance type thing where we're not going to have to discuss and educate as much as we're going to be discussing projects to improve it or projects towards an end goal. So I think that naturally, if we stay on the C&D processing ordinance and materials and road construction, that we're coming to some conclusions, not the end, but we're coming to some conclusions on the direction that we're wanting to move. Now, it might take us a while to get to the end result, but I think that we're starting to narrow our focus on a few things that won't take as much discussion time. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes I ramble, so.
So I guess another question to the committee would be, is that, I mean, I think that's what we should continue to focus on because of all the reasons we just mentioned, but are any of these other items anything that anyone on the committee feels like we should be spending more time on or should take another look at? Or should we just continue to work on the process of the C&D and those couple items? I myself think we're making headway with C&D. I think we're, like Pete said, we're getting there. We may not be close to having an end result, but we're getting a direction, and I'd like to continue to work on that. But I think as long as the other committee members think that's where we should go.
Ruth, Marie, what do you think?
I'd like to
Personally,
stay on this subject. I find it interesting.
I personally think it's too broad when you talk about C&D processing ordinance. Well, it's too broad of title, and it's going to be a long time before we have viable outlets for the entire scope of what's classified as destruction and demolition debris. With regard to reuse of road material, I think that, is a no-brainer. If we can do that, that's great. But in trying to, I guess, put a box around all C&D debris, it's going to be a very long process to bring that to fruition, because there's going to be multiple stakeholders that are going to be opposed to another ordinance, in all honesty. And I don't know that we're going to, grow that partnership with the community by requiring an ordinance to do something.
So you'd stay with the road construction because it narrows the field? Is that accurate?
Yes, I think the road construction, everybody can get on board with that. I mean, there's no sense in throwing away material that can go into asphalt.
If I could comment on what you said, Bruce, I agree with you that the C&D processing ordinance is a large net. And that's why our discussions have kind of moved into commodities as much as anything, because if we don't have uses for the commodities, such as in road construction, you really can't make a C&D processing ordinance work. But because we had that discussion about the processing is what led us to these major commodities that we need to focus on. So I think and first off, I know it says C&D processing ordinance. This committee doesn't have to abide by that word ordinance. It could be any number of ways to do something like this, and which would include a partially education, but also driving C&D processing through demand, and having the industry just pick it up. It might take a little bit longer, but it's a whole lot less resistance to do so. So yeah, I agree with you, Bruce. Anything that we do in C&D processing is going to be long, but and I think we are at a point where we drive it through right now by looking at the individual commodities that would be going into a C&D processing facility and making sure that it has a home. And once we have that home, then we start driving value and demand. And then somebody comes in and wants to put a C&D processing facility in. And at that point, we can choose to make it a phased in, education first, then certain major roads or buildings and all the way down. And that could be a 5-year process before anything is really at that conclusion, but we're driving towards the end of recovering C&D material.
So if you were to select the two commodities that we've talked the most about, and we continued with those, would it be asphalt, shingles, and cement?
Yeah, I would think concrete. Those are the two main things in road construction. There are two major things in C&D waste that we need to find a home for. I would want to add gypsum drywall eventually to try to find a home for that, because there are uses for it. And, it's just not something that's done here. So what is the barriers to making that something that takes place here? So I would like to focus on those three materials mainly. And if we find a good home and a good process for those, it makes it so much easier down the road for somebody to come in and do a C&D processing facility.
I see Adam shaking his head yes. What about Marie and Bruce?
Personally, I agree with asphalt, concrete, shingles. Gypsum is a commodity that is, I mean, if you're looking at, it's a challenging commodity to reuse, and there's been attempts and it's possible to compost it, but it requires an encapsulated facility because it has tremendous odor emissions. So it's going to be a little more difficult if you try to compost it. Are you going to crush it and use it for any type of filler? I don't know what, standard, road construction or anything like that would require. But,
Yeah, the gypsum board and the drywall, you're right, Bruce. It's a process that has to be done. And it could be that what we do is work on grants to help jumpstart a facility like that, or to make it more viable to be able to do. Because I think that there is an end use for it. There's a way to use that material. But it's maybe the capital cost of it, or it's an education cost of it. But even Matt Smith has mentioned that, he's interested in that. And, so I think that's our first focus would be on shingles and concrete, moving into drywall, knowing that drywall may be it has a little bit higher challenges to it, but something that would be well worth it, because drywall is a huge part of those C&D loads that's coming in. And if you found a home for that, then I think that C&D processing becomes a real thing and a very viable thing.
I can't disagree with that. Particularly if, we currently have the technology to do 3 out of the 4 commodities that we've mentioned, whether it's concrete, asphalt, shingles. We've got means of incorporating those in the new commodity. And then with the stretch to gypsum board, I would be supportive of that. But just if we blow it up to all the different commodities in the C&D classification, I think that would be too broad of a spectrum.
It sounds like most of us agree with what both of you have just said. So essentially, we're not saying anything about changing the matrix. We're saying that we're looking at several things in the matrix in conjunction with one another, and that we're going to proceed with looking at least initially, what can be used in road construction. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
I would agree.
I think kind of like what Bruce is saying is, and he's right, C&D is hugely broad. It's very broad, and there's all kinds of different materials that could be considered C&D. Maybe it is a good idea to start with smaller portions of that. And like we say, and maybe the road construction can be that smaller portion. So we start here trying to find a good outlet for shingles, a good outlet for crushed concrete, a good outlet for recycled asphalt. And as those outlets increase and that demand raises for that material, then again, the processing will follow suit with the value of those commodities. So I do agree that we have to pick certain materials in order to focus on getting rid of those before we can get into a large C&D processing facility. And if I agree that those are materials I'm very familiar with, the process I'm very familiar with. So I do agree that maybe we should start with just a few known commodities, make sure we have a home for those, make sure we can continue to that home will last. It because like I said, shingle processing, shingle recycling, it has been very cyclical. I mean, up and down. Like I've had years where we're recycling a ton of it. I've had the last 5 years where we're recycling none of it. So sustaining a home for that material is also a big factor in that. And if we can continue to find those outlets, increase the value to those outlets, then a lot of this stuff will fall into place naturally. And then you can continue to expand on different items, or commodities, I guess you would say.
So and Adam, I agree with you 100%. Bruce, I agree with you as well. So could we make it a checkpoint to take to the full committee and then to the board? Just what we had just discussed is that we're working on, these are going to be our focus. We're going to work on individual commodities to make sure that they have homes that will help drive the value and the ability for us to have a C&D processing facility in Louisville down the road. Does that, and honestly, I think that fits with what David Wicking said. And I think what Matt Smith had indicated at certain commodities that if you found homes for, you can make that work. So
I would agree. I would agree. I think the greatest thing is we have primarily all the infrastructure needed to handle those commodities already in existence. There's not a large capital outlay that's going to be required by the county or any individual company, because we have the crushers. You know, we're in a limestone heavy area that have, you know, we've got the crushers, we've got the conveyors, we've got the trucks, and we've got the need. I like the idea of putting a, you know, gypsum type of, you know, test out there to where if we need to issue some type of grant to propel that commodity forward, that would be interesting as well. But focusing on the 4 commodities, I think is a great start.
Yeah, and I think naming those commodities for the reports to the advisory committee and the board will help, because I think that all of us have different levels of knowledge in this area, but by actually listing the commodities, I think we bring more people on board we're talking about.
Excellent discussion.
Is that
I think
enough?
that
Shall we go on to the next topic?
Marie Burnett has posted something in the chat, and I will say, Marie, I saw your little mute thing go away at one point and then it came back. So I don't know if you clicked and clicked off. Now it is unmuted again if you want to try to speak. Or maybe your microphone doesn't work. But if you open the chat, it does say, I think Pete and Bruce are on the right track, and I am thankful that we may be moving forward with something achievable and sustainable.
We don't need to vote on this, do we, Pete?
No, I don't think so. But I think that the staff would like a general approval that, hey, if you guys could prepare something for the full committee and for the board to let them know that these are things that we've decided on, and this is a direction that we're going to move. I think that would be, if that's okay, I would like to be able to have the committee's blessing to go do that.
Would you have somebody draft and send it to all of us for comment?
Yeah, I think we can do that. Yeah, sure.
That would be helpful. And if we do it by email, we could have this done in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, awesome.
Are you Pete, you just looking for someone to speak at the full committee meeting and just talk about what we just discussed and kind of the direction that we were looking to go?
Sure, that's, I guess, up to the committee chair here, on how we want to do it. I think that we would like to have some kind of, in conjunction with whoever's going to speak on it, is making sure that they're okay with some slides that kind of bullet point, and illustrate what we're talking about.
I think
Okay.
that having something in writing is very helpful. Sometimes 6 months out, it's hard to remember what was said.
6 months?
Well,
2
even
weeks
3.
for me.
Yes.
Okay, then
Okay.
the staff is good. We know our task.
Okay, that's great. You were going to report on the recyclable materials for the city and the state department?
Right, right. Well, let me start by saying what we've done. And after our last meeting, I spoke with our Department of Public Works Engineering Division, and just to kind of get an idea. And it's taken me down this wormhole to a certain extent, which I think is excellent. Number one, the Department of Public Works already utilizes as many shingles as they can in their projects. Number two, they already use as much recycled aggregate as they can, from what they tell me. Now, keep in mind that the Department of Public Works really doesn't do that much work. They contract a lot of materials out, which sent me to look at, who was it? They sent me to the Plant Mix Asphalt Industry of Kentucky organization, whose director is Brian Wood. And Karen, myself, and Diane met with Brian virtually. And just a little bit about this organization. Their role was a shared goal with the Federal Highway Administration and the National Asphalt Pavement Association, and it is to support and promote sustainable practices such as the use of recycled materials and warm mix asphalt. The use of recycled material, primarily reclaimed asphalt pavement and reclaimed asphalt shingles. So this is right up their alley. So we had a really long conversation, and Adam said earlier that in the last 5 or so years, the amount of shingle recycling has reduced significantly, and we found out why. There's a big concern about brittleness when you get up to that 4 to 5%. I think it's 4 to 5% of the mix. And so that is kind of precipitated the move away from RAS, or recycled asphalt shingles. So we talked about possibilities of, okay, so how can we get around this hurdle? And, we ask, can the mix just be 1 to 2%? Because 1 to 2% would still drive the market fairly well. And that is a possibility, maybe. So when we got started to talk into the weeds a lot, we went down another hole, and that is to talk with, what is his name? Scott Worth. With Bluegrass Testing Laboratory. And his whole purpose is basically, he's the mad chemist of asphalt, shingles, and paving in this region. So we've had a contact with him, and they have agreed to have as many people as we want to come out and learn about this, to be able to ask questions about this, so that we can figure out what the barriers are and possibly break those barriers down. One of the things that I think is part of the issue is it was always thought that asphalt shingles, when they were put into the asphalt mix, would act as the binder. It would melt and be kind of the liquid binder that held everything together. And what they're finding out is that's not necessarily the case. And that is what is causing some of the brittleness when you get up in the higher percentages. So there is the possibility in experimenting of what's called rejuvenators. And these rejuvenators, when you add them to asphalt shingles somewhere in the process, where I don't know, will remobilize that material. And, it's possible that it starts to replace some of that liquid asphalt binder that they have to use. And apparently the liquid asphalt binder is very expensive. And if you can replace that with something else, then it becomes much more economical. And he basically said the economics of it is not really the issue. He said it's been a better, or at the minimum, a wash when it comes to pricing. So it's the quality that's the issue. And I think one of the questions is whether the rejuvenators are as expensive as the liquid binder. And I'm not sure that they've really decided what that could be. So I think it would be a great field trip, and for us to be able to go to this laboratory and learn about what is going on, and see what those possibilities are, and see if we can help them in any way, because it's in our interest to do so. And if we can learn something there, I think it helps us down that road to making asphalt shingles not just more beneficial locally, but to the rest of the state. So my ask right now is if anyone is interested in making that, please email us in the next day or so we can go ahead and get this set up. And then the other part of it is that I will be sending out to the committee a paper that was done by hang on a second. And this was sent to me by Mr. Wood. It's from the NAPA, National Asphalt Pavement Association. It's an asphalt pavement industry survey on recycled materials and warm mix asphalt usage. And this was completed in 2019. And it has a lot of this information, more information than anybody here will ever want on what's going on here. Anybody that wants to take a cruise through there, in addition to coming to this laboratory with us, I think you can learn everything you want to know about asphalt. Concrete wise, when I talked to them, there was no reason why concrete can't be replacing the virgin rock in most underlayment underneath as road base in roads. And as far as he knew, that there was no issues. And I think it's more of a promotion and education to let people know that this is out there. So that's also another thing that we can discuss with at the laboratory. So now that I've talked for 5 minutes, questions?
I think also at some point in time, I'd like to talk to people who actually mix the asphalt at the back end, because I understand there are a number of changes that have taken place. As I told you, we ended up putting fibers in our asphalt here in Prospect this year. And I think that from that perspective, it's a little less esoteric maybe than the laboratories. I think both of them are really important.
Sandra, to your point there, some of the other things that were being used in this on an increasing quantity is that those fibers and material from recycled tires I think I talked a little bit about that as well. Blast furnace slag, steel slag, cellulose fibers, and fly ash is also increasingly being used in asphalt pavement. And I think that those are things that we would learn a whole lot more about, because we might be talking about shingles, but there may be other areas that we can increase the use of material as well. Good point.
I agree. Well, if you're willing to go on the field trip, if you'll email Pete, I already did that while he was talking. So he already knows that I want to go. But if the rest of you would also do it, and you would also send out an email to the people that are not here today, so that they know that this is available too.
I will open this up to anybody in the full committee and board members as well.
Excellent. Anything else?
That would be my report.
Well, it's time for education, and finally, we were giving Karen more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm usually at the end.
I know.
We did get your, from the last meeting, you asked us to kind of create a presentation. I don't necessarily want to go through the entire presentation because the goal, I believe, is to do this for the full committee. But I would like to show you basically what I put together and make sure that I'm on the right track as to what you believe would be helpful. So I'm going to share. Oh, let's see. I'm going to do it that way. Okay. All right. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the first slide, I went over the website and everything that the district website, offers. Then I have a slide about social media and kind of how we use that. I think that could be fleshed out a little bit more if anyone feels that we need to, but we're active on Nextdoor, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, YouTube, we don't necessarily use it as social so much, but we do post our webinars and our meeting recordings there. So we have that account. And then I have some slides that all look kind of like this, that have that little icon at the top to show that we're talking about a recommendation here. And so there's a brief description, which is the same stuff we've been putting in all of our matrix and different documents, that kind of shares what that recommendation is supposed to do. And then at the end of this, I kind of share some of the things that we're doing and how they're correlated. So our this is waste reduction and reuse education. So No Waste Wednesday posts that I do, and then the webinars that we did a lot over the past year, of course, because of COVID. We couldn't really do in-person things, and they turned out to be pretty successful. I'm kind of taking a break on them right now, but all of that is correlated in that education, residential education recommendation. We did start the No Waste Ambassador program. We have 9 active ambassadors that were trained. And so there's 3 photos of how they've helped us out. We had a couple of events that we had some of the ambassadors come and help. And 2 of our ambassadors actually have helped us with our Oops Tag program. We did complete the $5,500 grant that we got from the state to help us build our resource library. So the plan is to train another group in January. And then I have some slides. I know I've shared about this program before, but we'll make sure, this has to be included. The Recycle Right program, which we kind of want to rename because we want to be able to do it for other waste streams, not just recycling. But we've now officially completed our 3 pilot areas. And we do intend to have an ongoing program in the future that would have actual staff just for this. And then the future program can include specialty items that don't belong in the garbage as well, like yard waste. So we would have to kind of build out some other kinds of tags and things, but we've shared the results of Deer Park that we did. We made improvements in Deer Park and in the South Side neighborhood. But I'm super excited to share today that we finished up our Shawnee area. We actually did 4 taggings there, and our 4th one was this morning. And we're just super excited that we can show that we made some improvement there. So on that left graph, we started out with 21% of the recyclers having a green tag, meaning they did everything right, and went up to 48% today. And then both our yellow tags and our red tags of like, oops, you did that wrong, went down. And all of our top contaminants went down as well. So we were really excited about that. Compost bin sales and workshops, kind of sharing what we've sold and that we've done virtual classes. And I used to do in-person workshops every year. And so we would like to get back to that. School programs, that's kind of another thing that we have not been able to do, but we really would like to get back into that and promote that more. These slides are similar, you might have seen before, but about the recycling cart grant program, and we're in full swing with that right now, which is taking up a lot of our time. But this is just kind of about that distribution and the educational materials that were used with that. And all of those kind of fall under this recommendation for expanded marketing campaign for recycling and composting. And then I have some slides. Again, we've shared about our pop-up drop-offs before. We keep adding to this chart that's showing how much we've collected or diverted as well. That's our schedule, some photos. And then we are getting these zip code maps for every event we do. And the red and orange is where people are coming from. So you can really see that where the event is, that's where a lot of the folks are coming from. The central one really gets some of the people from all over. And then the East End and the West End really kind of focus on a lot of the people from that area come, but somebody comes from just about every zip code every time. So we'll have our next one in a couple of weeks at Metro Fleet Services again on Newburgh. So the pop-up drop-offs, I need to add in the description there for that recommendation, but pop-up drop-offs are kind of they correlate with the recommendation for the self-haul where we're trying to sort and recover more. Business outreach is something on our plans that we need to focus on. There are a couple of recommendations for technical assistance, and we really, as an education department, we have plans to work on that, whether it's multifamily or just general businesses. And then I threw in this anti-litter campaign slide here at the end, just because it's something that we were trying to get together in conjunction with the Clean Collaborative, but we haven't gotten real far on that yet. So Sandra now and committee. Let's see, I can stop sharing. There we go. Is that what you had in mind?
I think that's excellent because I am more and more impressed with how much you do and how even people on our committees don't recognize, because we talk about small components of it. And that's the first overview that I've seen. That was excellent.
Okay. And we can certainly, I can talk more in depth about those things. I just didn't want to make you listen to the whole thing twice. So we'll plan on that. I think for the advisory committee then, right? Pete, isn't that what we talked about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on we'll talk to the full committee about it to see if they want to move forward with the board.
forward. Yeah.
with that
Okay.
report. I would want to add right here of the magnificent job that Karen and her team does. And knowing the day-to-day and everything that takes place, running out of time to do things. And really, I think that we're doing really well. I think that there's a lot more material and a lot more things that we can do that may, we're just gearing up in this regard. So an excellent job by the education team, and we're real proud of them.
Thanks, Pete.
Actually, you really are, and you don't see the effects sometimes. I love your graphs because that really does.
You're dropping out,
Do
Sandra.
you know what she said before?
You dropped out real bad. We didn't get, but
Oh,
I didn't get
my
much of
only
anything,
point
what you
was
said.
that it really is making a difference. People really are finding things out they didn't know before. And maybe if we only do one recycle person every day, that's still a lot at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Is there anything else? And I guess we're at the public input portion of our agenda. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make comments? Seeing none, our next meeting is August 10th. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Marie, Adam, second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sure no one's opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Hey, Pete, real quick, you say
Yes,
you're
sir.
gonna send an email out about that field trip or the meeting and reply back whether we want to go or not? Or you want me to just email and say, yes, I want to go?
Yes, you want to go. Just send
Okay.
me that as a reminder
Okay.
that you're interested.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all.